Pink Pantheress is one of the most beloved new stars in the music industry right now. But she ruffled some feathers this week when a clip from her interview with Arshawn from Kids Take Over went viral. She said she doesn't listen to albums. Let's hear it directly from her.
Because you know why? I don't listen to albums, I just listen to songs.
That's crazy.
I don't listen to albums. That's why when it came to my own album, I was like, do people care about track listing? And
Yes, that's like a really big thing.
I couldn't believe it. You know, like when I saw people review my album, some people were like, oh, it's a great album, but the track listing doesn't make sense. I'm like, it's just listen to the song. So?
Pink Pantheress was born in 2001, which happens to be the same year that Apple first unveiled the iPod. So it shouldn't surprise too many people that her listening habits are not rigidly aligned with the album format. But that hasn't stopped the internet from chiming in with their 2 cents. Some are backing her up, calling the album format outdated, and basically throwing it into one of those compilations where they show a bunch of past their prime athletes in uniforms that you might have forgot they ever wore. Others are acting like the world is doomed for not valuing the album, calling it yet another symptom of a generation full of ADHD afflicted, phone addicted, TikToking, brain rotting, Rizzler Ohio gyat for gyatting, teens and 20-somethings. So who is right in this epic showdown? Pink Pantheress' response to the discourse on Twitter is a good enough answer in itself. All that to say, there is no right or wrong way to consume or make music. It's people trying to say there is that stops people from enjoying and creating art in whichever form they want. Who cares if I listen to albums in full, lol. It's music. It's meant to be unique to everyone. My bad British accent was calling me from the side of the desk like the Green Goblin mask, but I decided to be mature and read that in my normal voice. If you want to thank me for sparing you guys, you could throw me a like and subscribe. But seriously, if you like videos on music, I do one every week. If you want to see them early, go to my Instagram, HADJI, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post all the videos in there one day early. Also wanted to say thanks to everybody who's checked out my latest single, Tricky. Ironically, that's a single from an album that I'm working on, so stay tuned for more stuff. If you like the song in the background, it's that. It should give you an idea. Alright, back to the video. Pink Pantheress is right. Everyone should enjoy music however they want. It's such a broad and beautiful art form, with so many use cases and so many different possibilities. Why restrict yourself to fit what somebody on the internet deems is superior? But with that being said, her comments and the resulting discourse can allow us to have a fascinating conversation about the importance of the album. And I will try my best to answer the question, do albums still matter? To understand whether or not the album still has value in today's world, we need to go back to where it came from. And it may surprise some people that the album isn't as old as you might think it is. Recorded music being sold in large quantities, after all, is a 20th century concept. Music, of course, has existed for pretty much as long as humans have. Even cavemen had little flutes, apparently. The ability to record music was actually invented in the 1800s, and it was actually invented twice, once in France and then again in the United States by Thomas Edison. But until the 1900s, it wasn't something that the average person would have in their house. So music was mostly something that you would go see in live settings. And there were a bunch of different live settings where you would expect to hear music. Or maybe you even had a piano in your house yourself where the family could gather around and sing songs together. The music industry as we know it was originally founded on selling sheet music so that people could do stuff like that at home. Billboard charts were actually invented at first to track things like sheet music sales. I'm simplifying a little bit, but yeah, you get the idea. Physical recorded music became a thing that you could sell in the 1900s, and the first vinyl record was sold in 1931. They first became popular in 1948 though, when Columbia Records unveiled the format of 33 1/3 RPM, which could fit 21 minutes of music on each side, for a total of 42 minutes. This is where our concept of how long an album should be really comes from. You see, it wasn't determined by people sitting around and asking themselves, what is the ultimate runtime for an artist to express themselves, or even how much music would a consumer want when they go to the store. It was just based on the technological limitations of the time. And with this standard now set, artists who signed to labels or otherwise would go out and make albums with the intention of being able to sell them on those discs that fit 42 minutes. When I was still pretty new to this YouTube thing, I did a video about why albums are so long now, and some of this I kind of covered in that. But in general, you'd see albums in the 50s, 60s, and 70s be in the 40-something minute runtime, unless they were double albums in which you would have 2 different discs. Of course, the 7-inch single was also a common seller as well, But consumers love getting bang for their buck. And would you rather get up and change the record player every time you want to hear a new song? Or buy yourself 20 minutes of chill time before you gotta go flip the thing over and hear the second half? The form of the album morphed as the technology that held it evolved. After the vinyl came the cassette, which was introduced in the early 1960s and could hold up to 60 minutes across its two sides. Artists and labels would take advantage of this extra space, and when the compact disc or the CD came out in 1982, it expanded to around 74 minutes of music. Albums got a little longer when there was the possibility to put more music onto the format that they were being sold on. Makes sense. That pretty much summarizes how technology shaped the way that we see albums today. But whether they were going for 45 minutes or for 65 minutes, these albums were the primary form of consumption for personal listening to music, because fans still had to buy these physical items in store, whether they were vinyl or CDs or cassettes. In terms of listening to music, you had the choice to go buy it or borrow it from a friend, or you could turn the radio on where you would have no control over what you would really hear. Music videos added a third option, but it was kind of the same thing as the radio, as you would just flip channels between VH1 and MTV and see whatever they were playing. You didn't have YouTube where you could go pick whatever music video you wanted, or you could put on a video essay about the importance of the album and half listen to it while you fold your laundry or eat your lunch. This system created the culture of album listening. Artists would get creative within the restrictions of the framework of the album, telling stories that weave the track list together in a particular order, or going with particular sounds in different album eras to create easily delineated moments in their careers. The world's most popular artists in the 20th century, like the Beatles or Michael Jackson, all have eras that can be pinpointed to depending on which 45 to 65 minute disc they were hawking at that particular moment. Well, these artists that we remember and love so much made the most out of whatever was handed to them. It's important to remember that they didn't really have a choice to do something else. This is what labels were doing to make money. It was a system that they had and it worked for them. And there was no internet to just go and upload your music. Music had to be manufactured with a lead time for production, and then neatly packaged into these physical formats that were sold in stores. It goes without saying that today's artists are not held to those creative restrictions anymore, at least not by technology. Artists can literally drop music in seconds by going to YouTube or SoundCloud and just hitting upload. Getting music onto DSPs takes a bit longer using a service like DistroKid, but honestly, in some cases, it'll probably be there the next day. And if you're signed to a label that has artist services, they could probably get that up pretty quickly for you. The physical limitations no longer exist. And just like how the distribution of music has changed with technology, the consumption of it has also moved away from a format that encouraged front-to-back album listening. No longer are most people popping in a CD or dropping a needle on a vinyl. The vast majority of music listeners in 2024 are listening on DSPs. It's now as easy as a click of a button to save a song to your own created playlist. You can go through an album once and just save the songs you like, not have to worry about smashing that skip button. Or you could be even less active and go to a pre-made playlist and just pick the songs you like out of that. Or, as I went over in the autoplay video, you can just let the algorithm feed you music until you're full. Plenty of artists take advantage of the new landscape of music listening. Some drop singles frequently, just weeks or even days apart from each other. Some tease songs on TikTok until one catches motion, basically letting the people, or in reality the algorithm, decide what's going to come out and when. But still, the biggest artists in the world regularly release albums, and their career cycles are almost always orbiting around those albums. Which begs the question, why bother with this antiquated format? The truth is, the album holds many purposes, beyond just being a way to release a batch of songs in a particular order. The most obvious of these is cementing an era. For a lot of A-list artists, the album cycle has evolved into something that could more accurately be called the era cycle. It's no longer just about a set of songs, sequenced in a particular order. It's about the imagery and the cover art and the videos, and the message that the artist is trying to push across. It can be a statement about where the artist is in their life, their identity, or maybe how that identity has changed over time. There are several artists who I would define as album first, and one of them that comes to mind here to use as an example is Tyler the Creator. Every single Tyler the Creator project, all the way from Bastard up to Call Me If You Get Lost, can be separated from one another by image, sound, and message. On Bastard, he had a conversation with a therapist about his teenage angst. On Wolf, he took steps away from his horror-tinged past and put on colorful clothes and hopped on a bike and had campfires. On Flower Boy, he used the theme of growing and blossoming to open up about his sexuality. He became a character for Igor, putting on a wig and wearing this suit to sing songs about unrequited love. And with Call Me If You Get Lost, he enlisted DJ Drama to return to his rap roots. and use his love of travel to make a unique brand of flex raps. I skipped a few along the way, but you could do this for every single one of them. None of these eras would be as fleshed out without that soundtrack counterpart. The album cycle gives artists like Tyler, who take advantage of it, a chance to make a bigger statement. Artists who can nail the album the way that Tyler does can punch higher commercially than their biggest hit songs would normally allow them to do. Tyler's highest charting single on the Billboard Hot 100 is Earthquake, which went to number 13. He's never even had a song in the top 10. And on the album level, only 2 of his 6 albums have gone number 1, and only once has he ever sold over 100,000 copies in his first week, and that was over a decade ago. But at the same time, Tyler was one of the headliners of Coachella this past year, and he runs a hugely successful music festival of his own, Camp Flog Gnaw. The truest tell of an artist's popularity and reach is getting fans in those seats, and Tyler has that part of his career down to a science. His music makes an impact that extends beyond those counting stats, and a big part of that is how he maximizes his album or era format. We have several examples this year of artists putting their eggs into the basket of the album, with varying levels of success. One of the biggest success stories is Charli XCX. Charli has been around for years. Many people probably first heard her on Iggy Azalea's Fancy, believe it or not. But she's always had a bit of a cult fan base. Her 2022 album Crash saw her take a big step forward in popularity, but her latest album Brat blows it out of the water. And it's more than just a successful album, it's a whole phenomenon. And a big part of that is her nailing the execution of her album release. The album's cover is memeable. She's not the first artist to do that. A lot of people might remember photoshopping the tiny Drake from the Views cover and putting it onto different things. But everyone from stands to brands is using that green color in the font. Brat Summer has become a catchphrase that is so ubiquitous that the New York City MTA system is using it to announce train delays. Even when an artist isn't landing with the people as hard as Charli XCX is, they're still using the album format in unique ways. Eminem's latest album, The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace, is a concept album that starts with a bunch of risque and controversial tracks that are coming from his alter ego Slim Shady, before he, spoiler alert, wrestles control back and becomes today's Eminem again, to set the record straight. Now, whether this project landed with you or not, which is not really for me to decide, it's a mission that can really only be accomplished in the album format. Nailing an album cycle can give you benefits beyond just the moment that you do it in. To go back to Tyler for a sec, he did a great video for his song Sorry Not Sorry, where he references all of his old eras. Speaking of eras, Taylor Swift's gigantic The Eras tour allows her to revisit each of those albums in her career in a big stage format. But even on a smaller scale, artists like Earl Sweatshirt and Isaiah Rashad have done tours for the 10-year anniversaries of their albums, Doris and Sylvia Mode respectively. Anderson .Paak is doing one this year for his breakout album Malibu as well. If you knock the album cycle out of the park, people will remember. Donald Glover's album Bando Stone in the New World came out this past Friday, and in an interview with the New York Times, his manager Fam Udeorji talked about how the goal was to have this album be something that people can use to look back at 2024 with. If people listen to this album and it becomes a part of their identity, if they look back a year later and are reminded of how much they listened to it and what that felt like in the summer of 2024, that kind of real estate is way more valuable to me. Now, whether or not he succeeds in that mission, we'll have to see. But it's cool to see artists prioritizing it either way. But for every Charli XCX or Tyler the Creator, there are a couple bigger artists you can name who are not taking advantage of the unique world-building opportunities of the album cycle. Or if they're trying to, they're kind of failing. For a case of the latter example, Katy Perry is struggling to get her latest album cycle off the ground, and people were kind of clowning her music video when it came out. But as to the former, a lot of artists in 2024 seem to be dropping albums because it's what they're supposed to do and not because they're trying to push some larger message. Artists' success is judged by the first week numbers that their albums can move. And so the construction of said albums can sometimes feel like it's done around maximizing that first week number and not really about the listener's experience. Not every example of that is as egregious as the French Montana one that I covered, where he dropped like 5 different versions of the same album to just try to squeeze out some sales. But it's a common complaint that many albums these days are bloated and not cohesive. A lot of rap fans lament this, but it's not just hip hop. Many pop and country albums are long as hell too. It might be odd at first to see some fans complaining about their favorite artists giving them more music. But if you ask me, a lot of those groans are coming from a place of missing when the album cycle was taken seriously. These 25-track, not so cohesive album experiences are a big reason why listeners in Pink Pantheress' generation don't care as much about the front to back album experience. Yes, you can say it's a part of everybody's attention span getting ruined by their cell phones, but it's deeper than that too. It's a two-way street. If their favorite artists don't care about that experience, then why should they? An album cycle is, of course, a big commitment, and some artists are perhaps not ready to make a statement at the moment that they're ready to release music. We've seen artists like Drake shy away from calling projects albums due to the connotation that it would bring. Think about when he called If You're Reading This It's Too Late a mixtape, or when he called More Life a playlist. The mixtape has its own connotations in hip-hop, and so I think If You're Reading This could probably be given a pass, but calling More Life a playlist is low-key hilarious. These words are there to help dull a fan's expectations. If the project isn't up to the standards of an album, then you can just be like, come on guys, it wasn't an album, it was just a playlist. It's more of a theoretical example when it comes to More Life because I actually really like that project. I think it's pretty good, but I digress. J. Cole is another example. He hasn't dropped an album since 2018 when he dropped KOD, and he's been teasing the follow-up album, The Fall Off, ever since the last track on KOD. But in the meantime, he's dropped these like label projects, and then he's dropped 2 mixtapes, The Off Season and Might Delete Later, which are essentially full projects, but by not calling them albums, it allows Cole to relieve some of the pressure and preserve that canon discography. One of my favorite examples when it comes to thinking about how much an album can affect an artist's era is Frank Ocean. People have been posting missing posters for Frank since like 2018 or 2019. Did you know he's released 9 songs onto DSPs since Blonde came out in 2016? This is also not counting songs that he's played on Homer Radio that have been ripped, or songs that he's performed live. I'm not trying to say that that's like a prolific output, it's definitely not, but it is like a short album's worth of music. From the way people talk about Frank, you would think that it's been complete radio silence since Blonde and Endless. Without the album to anchor the blonded radio era of singles like Chanel and Provider and Lens, or what some fans call the Look at Us, We're in Love era of In My Room and DHL, a lot of people feel like that whole period just kind of never happened. This is not to make a statement about how active Frank has been, but rather to show how powerful that actual album can be in stamping a certain era in an artist's career. I think there are interesting comparisons to be made between the album and the movie. When they both came out, they were products of the limitations of the technology that held them. But people fell in love with the format and used the rules of it to make cool things that make all of us feel away and inspires the next generation to do the same thing, even when technology has changed some of those limitations. Thanks to innovations like streaming services at home, movie consumption looks a lot different today than it did just 15 years ago. There are also plenty of opportunities to watch other things on a screen. TV shows, YouTube, and short form content on TikTok and Instagram. But these things don't make the movie obsolete. The movie might hold a little less market share in the attention economy of watching things, but if you think about it, the movie didn't really eliminate the play either when it came out, right? And great movies still come out every year and get dissected, analyzed, and some of the big ones still sell a lot of tickets. I say all this about the album to say yes, albums do still matter. But that doesn't make Pink Panther's point completely invalid. What she says is still true. It's dogmatic to assume that everyone who listens to music needs to do it in the front-to-back album format, at the threat of execution every time they want to press skip. There are so many different ways to listen to music. It's definitely true that the vast pool of options can make releasing an album a little bit daunting for an artist, especially a smaller one. For me, I like to create with albums in mind because I was inspired by people like Tyler the Creator and Kanye West, who did such a great job of doing that when I was a kid. I want to world build with whatever resources are at my hands. I'm not going to wait until I get bigger ones. But at the same time, I recognize how big of an ask it is to get a listener in 2024 to click on a relatively unknown person's album. So even though I create with the bigger project in mind sometimes, I usually drop a lot of singles so that I have multiple chances to catch people's attention. This always felt like the best way to accept the trade-off of still wanting to create an album but also really trying to reach new people. It's unfortunate though that it really is that hard to get people to listen to an album in 2024, because they probably still are the best way to connect with a listener on a deeper level. When I think of newer artists that have entered my rotation in recent years, the ones that I'm actually driven to go see live, buy tickets, buy merch, really care about, watch their music videos, all that kind of stuff, they're the ones who usually gave me a full-length album. One of the best examples that I can think of this recently is Jordan Ward. I first heard a Jordan Ward song on Spotify in like 2019. It was probably in like my Discover Weekly or something, called Okay Okay HADJI. And I listened to that song a lot, but then I kind of forgot about him because there's just so many artists and so many songs on Spotify. So like 3 years later, when he starts rolling out his album, I get caught back in and I'm hooked. And then if I look at my Spotify Wrapped in 2023, Jordan Ward is everywhere because his album Forward just captivated me. It was great. And there really weren't that many other albums in the year 2023 that I was going back to. It feels like a lot of artists would benefit from giving their fans an album to attach themselves to. But the truth is, making an album is obviously easier said than done. For one, it takes a high level of cohesion and creativity to make something that people are really going to want to return to. Also, it can cost a lot of money to do all the visuals in a way that's cohesive. Most of all, in 2024, you have to trust that what you're making will connect, instead of just asking people on the internet which songs they want and giving them a bunch of snippets and letting them choose. Because if you're really going to take your time to make an album, you gotta kind of believe in those songs. And that might be the hardest part. The album still matters, although, like a lot of things in 2024, it looks a lot different than it did in the past. There are so many choices when it comes to music, and there are so many ways to consume it even after you've made your choice. The days of lining up Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon with the Wizard of Oz movie and watching them together are long gone. Today, artists fight for the chance to even earn a first listen, let alone a second one, let alone the number of listens that it really takes for a fan to attach themselves to a project and start to understand some of the deeper things that an artist might have been going for when they made it. What do you guys think? Is the album dead? If not, what albums made you believe in the album again? And what do you want to see me talk about next? Let me know. Peace.